Welcome to the Light True Crime. I am now doing recap 3 from today, which was day 5 of the David Burke preliminary hearing. If you haven't yet, you can go back and watch my other recaps 1 and 2, which I did during the lunch break outside the courthouse. So those are already uploaded. Okay, so picking back up from where I left off from the second recap, we are at the cross-examination from David's team to the detective on the stand, and we're at April 22nd, 2025 at 6:08 p.m. Now, Celeste sent a message saying, to David, am I able to come on Thursday at all? David responds, no, nah. At 6:29 p.m., Celeste messages, I can't be effing friends anymore. You are with Neo and Celeste, bro. Bro, there's no possible way I cannot see you at all this week. Explain why I can't see you before Singapore. David says, because my parents are here and I want in-person convo. Why do I have to see you before Singapore? Celeste says, proof of your parents being there. I don't trust you. Flights or something. David, please stop lying. Your parents were there last weekend. And then there was something that I'm pretty sure, I usually mark it if I ever do miss something and I let you know. I feel like there's one little sentence there that I did miss. Again, writing as fast as I could with these messages. Celeste messaged, see you Wednesday night. I can see you tomorrow. I can go to Riverside too. Now sorry, my kitten. So we're on April 22nd and Celeste messages, well, we need to talk in person. Please, man. David says no. On April 23rd at 10:09 a.m., Celeste says, cut this shit out. I'm seeing you today. Regarding read this. So that didn't really make sense. David says, fine. Celeste says, David, what point are you trying to get at? And then I did miss another section right there because they swiped that text away really quick. What then came up was that defense brought up Celeste asked for the Uber. She was the one that asked him to open the door if he is home. She was saying that they can't verify that David was also home. It was just his phone that, corroborates with the evidence that was being testified to. Not David, it was the phone number. The defense also pushed on the detective about the investigation, asking if they reconstructed or tried to figure out what David was doing an hour before her death. So from 9 to 10 p.m. about. This is where they said that the defense said David was playing virtual reality games with 2 other people online. He was also playing a movie browsing game as well. They talked about Celeste being dropped off then around 10:10 p.m. and verifies that David's text asking where she was, believing that she died between 10:10 to 10:31 that night. That was only about 21 minutes. They also went to kind of hone in on this whole situation around that time of the drop off and saying that when she, essentially was unalived, that they haven't identified anyone who saw Celeste after she got out of the Uber or who saw David. And the detective agreed to that point. They don't have any witnesses specifically to it. They also were honing in on the fact that there's no witness to say what happened then at 10:10 p.m. and there's no evidence showing that anyone else was at home. An Uber could not verify the driver. He could not verify that he dropped her off at that house, saying that he really didn't have a recollection of the ride, but that he dropped her off at that address. That's where the drop-off was. There's no footage showing anything of her, and the same for David. And just to say, back in that, they're going to recross a redirect in a moment, and we're going to explain this whole no footage thing, right? So then again, on April 22nd, 2025 at 10:11 p.m., the defense says that there's nothing to verify any electronic or text messaging to verify whether what either Celeste or David were doing. And then on April 23rd, 2025, David was not at home and out during the day. So the detective does not know. They were asking, did you figure out what his plans were on the 23rd? What was going on? And the detective verified that he cannot remember if they investigated that or the activities afterwards. They did reference that there was an Interscope meeting note in the text messages because he had the album coming out, but no, they did not investigate, kind of the before and after of David's activities. This then went to the redirect. And apologies if I take a moment to read. I had a lot of notes and I was writing as fast as I could. So my handwriting got worse as I was trying to scramble everything and capture everything. So on the redirect, we had Beth Silverman just ask quickly a few questions. Beth asked the detective why they were not able to recover surveillance. And the answer was simply this, which is pretty obvious. So much time had passed. The systems override themselves, so there was nothing to recover. They reiterated the whole fact that the death of Celeste occurred in April, right? Late April, the evening of April 22nd, 2025, and that her body was not recovered till September, and the investigation didn't start till, mid-September. So all that time in between, 5 months, there was all this time that passed. They were not able, they didn't have a chance to recover surveillance. Neighbors didn't have that info. So that's where that left off. At that point, everybody was done with the witness. He was the last one on the stand. So the people rested their case, and then the defense rested their case. The next part was going to be the closing arguments, and a defense put forth some motions. So let's get into that. The defense kicked this off before it goes to the prosecution. The defense had a motion for insufficiency on all counts and circumstances, as well as holding orders. They were speaking to count 1, the unaliving, about it required to have proof of malice or forethought, saying that the DNA found at the residence and the car was consistent with the BLOOD from dismemberment, but it was not evidence of this with malice and forethought. They talked about malice in 2 different forms. The first one was express malice, and they were talking about this being a deliberate intention, and says that there's no evidence to show her to harbor. There's no statement or intent to harm her, and how he expressed his love and care for her. Then there was implied malice, which they were saying no consideration, provocation appears, and that the evidence shows provocation from jealous Celeste, that's what they said, jealous Celeste, and threats on his life. They say that texts with threats prove opposite, as well as texts to mutilate his thing. They went on to speak to the fact that no evidence shows that he knew, appreciated, or disregarded danger to life. The medical examiner can't tell circumstances that occurred, or if done at the same time, what instrument, or if this all occurred at the same time. They went on to say that these things negate that David stood by while she BLED out. They said that the medical examiner couldn't verify if she BLED out internally versus externally. They say that facts are not supported. There's no evidence of a deliberate intent to KILL. There's nothing showing of David's danger to life. They say concealment of death is not an unaliving charge. And they say that special circumstances are unconstitutional. We moved on to lying in wait. This portion, they were saying that there's a higher burden than deliberate intention to unalive. They're saying that intentional unaliving requires concealment of purpose, watching and waiting. A surprise attack from a position of advantage says that the waiting must be substantial amount of time. They say that the evidence does not support this, that Celeste expected him to be home and demanded to go over. They said that David tried to convince her not to come over and told her no, but that she insisted. And at 10:02 p.m., they referenced the text message where it said, Celeste says, "Girly pop, I'm almost there. Open the door if you are home." So saying that she knew she was going there, and was even saying, open up your home. I'm about to be there. The defense continued with their closing arguments, saying that David and his friends were online gaming before, so he wasn't watching and waiting for her. The ME determined also that they weren't able to tell if there was any struggle involved, and that they could not supply a surprise position of advantage or defensive wounds. The next part was covering the charge that involved the whole financial gain aspect. And They were saying that without concrete financial interest, it says evidence does not prove. It appears to preserve music, but not something under California law regarding future earning capacity. They were stating that this has to be proven to be what is in mind, and financial benefit comes down to preservation of reputation and his income stream. The income he had was contractual, realized, and banked, they said. He satisfied what he had to do for albums 1 through 2. Album 3 and 4 were not guaranteed, and that these financial decisions were all Interscope decisions, so it wasn't something that was within his control. Now, they spoke briefly about the December 2025 termination letter that he received, and it said that it didn't say in that termination letter, it didn't reference anything regarding April 23rd. It says that, and they also, again, were trying to bring up that he wasn't involved in his finances. He really knew what was going on. Other people handled that stuff for him. Then the defense went and spoke about the witness unaliving portion of the special circumstances, and they said that the evidence must show the purpose of the unaliving and that nothing showed subjective belief that she was interested in being a witness. They said that she wasn't involved in any investigation, and the threats that she made to David were socially made, that she would leak things, go to Val's house, go to Dad and tell lies. But it was never a threat that she was going to go to the police in that witness form of things. Then it also stated that, about hiding a relationship from police and missing posters, that doesn't count within this type of charge. Now, there's also something under concealment offense they mentioned, and it says that all of these require malice, mental states, and all of those fall short. So that is the defense closing arguments. And next, we're going to go into the people closing arguments. So I'm going to end this recap part 3 here from day 5 and recap 4. I'll start with the people closing arguments. I always like to remind everybody at the end of this that this is our victim here, Celeste Rivas Hernandez, who is the victim in this entire case and lost her life. So let's keep that in mind, and please keep the comments pretty civil. And if you have any questions or clarifications on what I read out, ask. If I said something wrong, I will try to clarify as well. Again, I'm reading off of my notes that I took in court of exactly what was being covered. So thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, what happens in the dark will always come to the light, and I will see you all in part 4.